What's the latest, Sammy?
Not a good result for Tom De Koning, who's going to miss at least the rest of the home and away season. Might even be more. Gerard and Kane, good evening to you. He's got the punctured lung. He's in hospital as we speak. Scans today on the foot that's revealed a fracture. I think there's some damage to the toe as well. He'll undergo surgery on Wednesday. So this was a bruising encounter against North Melbourne, but particularly against Tristan Cherry in the ruck, who used all of his size and his bulk and the rules available to him to blunt and try to nullify Tom De Koning's athleticism. So the punctured lung happened when he was tackled by Cherry in the third quarter, landed on top of him. That was what caused that damage in the third quarter. The broken foot happened in the first quarter when Tristan Cherry accidentally stood on his foot.
He's a wrecking ball.
Yeah, so as Tom De Koning sits in hospital tonight, and he has been playing under duress throughout the season, I'm led to believe there's been some other breaks in that body of his that he's managed to soldier on through. He was managed for a week. He was brought back in. He's pretty angry at the moment, and not just Tom De Koning, but I think the De Koning camp, angry that perhaps he wasn't given the free kicks that he was entitled to. And I think those around him will ask some questions of the AFL, backed up by vision and photos of as many as 8 to 10 incidents on the weekend of situations where Tristan Cherry's used his size and bulk, they would say illegally, to nullify the more athletic ruckman. And this has been a yin and a yang with the AFL for some time with the rules. You know, the centre circle, the line across the centre circle, the arm across the chest, or in many cases at the weekend with Tom De Koning, the arm across the neck, that I guess the Shane Mumfords of the world in the modern day competition,
scrappers,
the bangers and the physical ones and the ones that we love what they bring to, up against the more athletic
Why
rucks,
did we
the Luke
change the rule?
Jacksons of the world.
Was it because the umpires didn't like adjudicating?
The arm across?
No, the fact that
Or the centre circle?
Yeah.
With the line?
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but if you watched every centre bounce in that game
the
in
straight
particular,
arm, I think, was the issue.
you had Tristan Cherry lining up directly on the line, which is his right.
Yeah.
And you had Tom De Koning, and he can't go back as far anymore either, I might add. Going back a couple of metres, trying to get as much run up as he can, and just Tristan Cherry doing everything he can to stop him from leaping. And they're the rules that are available at the moment.
Should the ruckman have to start on the line? Because that's how it was designed when the great Neil Danaher called a meeting at the MCG, and about 2 clubs turned up. But the umpires turned up. I think it was Adrian Anderson at the time, and they changed it so they got rid of the PCL. You had to start within the circle.
Yeah.
And yet now, given the rule, the non-straight arm rule,
Well,
it's just become a wrestlathon.
I would assume to make the ruck available to all different shapes and sizes and skill sets
But
and
it was
abilities.
last year, wasn't it?
But
It's now less available.
yeah, it was
for
a contentious
jumping ruckmen.
rule last year, wasn't it?
Max Gawn
Yep.
has spoken in depth about the changing tactics towards him and how he has had to adjust. But yeah, if you don't want, if we want to see the beautiful tap ruck work in its purest form, this is the rule that is designed to eliminate that. And for the likes of the De Koning brothers, who their athleticism is going to be key, and they can't wrestle with Tristan Cherry. And Ned Reeves is a player who's really struggled as a result of this.
I don't think Hawthorn were overly pleased about it.
No, because they
early
changed
in
it
the year.
late. You've got your list organised, and then they changed the ruck rule after your list is assembled, and you're going, well, hang on, we've got a ruckman, which we believe this is his strength, and now you've just changed our rules. We've got no option to adjust our list in this way. So I think they should be rightly, and I can see the De Koning point there.
Yeah, so it was a hectic game for the Blues. Tom De Koning wasn't the only player coming on and off. He did come off for an ultrasound on the foot that interestingly showed it was all clear. And then he's gone back out there and it's far from all clear, and the foot has apparently given way later on in the game.
So it wasn't a bad ultrasound.
Not sure if the ultrasound was perhaps as categoric as it could have been or
Gary
should have
Lyon
been.
said earlier on in the year that they need to have MRI systems.
They do. At
the tunnel,
MRI,
like
the
they
ultrasound they do.
in the NFL, which is going to probably pick it up in, 10, 15 minutes.
Yep.
Maybe that's the way that we're going to go.
So they've got a please explain on their desk as well now, Carlton, or at least they will have soon, as have Adelaide, as have Brisbane for their management of their respective concussion management protocols. Now, we knew about Jordan Dawson. The Crows have since come out and said it wasn't the Nate Caddy incident in the third quarter. In fact, it was later on a clashing of heads with Nick Martin early in the fourth term that saw that concussion take place, hence the delay. Nevertheless, they'll have to explain that. Harry Mackay, we're familiar with what's happened here. 3:45 remaining in the third, but isn't taken from the field until there's 40 seconds left in that quarter, by which time he's kicked a goal around the body. The Blues docs are in the rooms at the time with Blake Acres, so is that enough of an alibi to satisfy the AFL, who have concussion spotters in the arc, who send texts as soon as they see something, send messages to the tablet on the bench?
Explain to their own spotters, or They're Carlton spotters.
Well, that's assuming the spotters picked up the incident, which I'm sure they would have.
Hard
Everyone
to
at
miss.
home did.
Yeah.
So the messages would have gone to the doctor's phones and also the tablet that sits on the interchange bench. Whether or not the delay was just simply because the doctors were required elsewhere remains to be seen. In Brisbane, to be honest, my information is Brisbane had no idea this was even coming. In fact, the first they heard that Please Explain was coming was when they saw it in the news, in the media this afternoon. So this concerns Harris Andrews, taken off the field, of course, for a test.
Yeah.
And then I don't think they're any the wiser as to what they've done wrong there. But again, a Please Explain for Brisbane as well. So there's a few things on
What
the
about
AFL
Thomas Papley?
Thomas Papley, in terms of umpire contact?
No, his injury.
Ankle injury. So I think there's a level of optimism around Tom Papley. Now,
There was none yesterday.
No, Sydney, very tight-lipped at the moment. He got scanned this afternoon, as a couple of his teammates did as well.
Yeah.
But I'm told he'll definitely be back this home and away season, and that there's an element of relief. But this is all subject to official confirmation once the
So
specialists
there's
are
still,
involved as
what
well.
have we got, 5 weeks to go?
Yep.
Well, it's still a significant injury. I mean, it's not you wouldn't think it's certainly not a lateral ligament. There might have been a touch of medial
He
ligament.
could not, and usually with an ankle. I mean, we saw Will Hayward with his ankle be able to fight out the second half very
But it wasn't a
effectively.
lateral ligament. It was
It must be
My query is it a less frank or it's sort
one of those
weird ones?
syndesmosis
Yeah,
things.
no mechanism for syndesmosis.
All right, but it looked nasty.
But,
It was in the moon boot.
it's got to be something a bit weird.
And just with the match review, so Papley was fined, contact with an umpire, Fife, Neil Bullen was as well. Eric Hipwood's the
Have you
one.
watched the Butters one?
I have, yeah.
And
Yeah, I was a bit surprised. But
Sammy.
but how many instances he had? So I had to check. So he's north of 36,000
It's
now.
still got to be reportable. It still has to be a reportable offence.
The avenue is open for him to appeal via written submission.
100% they should.
Written submission.
That for fines, you provide a written submission, so they don't have to appear at the tribunal. This is all to take away from potentially unnecessary tribunal hearings. So I'm assuming he would have done that over the course of his $36,000.
Jeff Gleeson, he needs a rest anyway. He needs a spell.
Yeah, so that was his
fifth offence.
fifth offence for rough conduct.
Yep.
So that was why it's a $7,500 whack.
So there's an escalation, is it, for everyone you
Yes.
get
Yeah.
pissed?
So basically, the message is, well, supposed to be anyway.
Keep your hands
Stop doing it. Yeah.
Stop touching anyone from the opposition is the message.
Okay.
And he has to pay them all himself. Every
I want
cent
to ask
too.
you.
Every cent.
Well, Hodgey's going to join us next. but
Post-tax.
I want to ask you
Tax
about
deduction.
who West Coast are going to get as their coach, because our man Gostradamus, didn't he go big?
What did he go with?
Well, Ken Hinkley. He went with this morning.
Oh, I
he
heard you
said-
talking about that with Bucks. Yeah, I didn't know it got out though.
Oh, Gostradamus is on fire. And didn't he show David King, who was boss on Saturday morning? Hodgey, welcome.
Oh.
I need you to turn your button on, Hodge.
Come on, General.
To come up with the audio.
One
here is
general
his-
down,
he had-
another general
he had
in.
one job to turn his microphone on.
My mic's on.
There it is.
Hey,
General.
Hey,
Hey.
guys, look into the back room in your office down in Melbourne, because I'm sitting here with the blue button on. I'm just like you, Kane. I can't say that I'm wrong. That was a good friendly
it was
discussion
tense.
with Kingy and myself. Oh, it wasn't tense. It was
tense.
For
Very
those
tense.
that didn't hear it, what was the guts of it, Kane?
Nah, it was. Oh, sorry, Kane. Well, I'll let Kane explain it then.
Well, Kingy believes that Essendon should be further advanced than where they are, and he gave some reasons behind that. And Hodgey was sort of defending some of the mistakes that were made for the Bombers, and in essence, I guess, defending the position that Essendon are in currently, Hodgey. And I assume that they have exceeded your expectations of where you thought they were going to be this year.
Well, I think if you look at where they've come from and where they are, I probably got fooled by them a few weeks ago when they beat Collingwood, but then we found out that Collingwood has been injury prone and aren't playing the football that we have. But you sort of look deeper into where Essendon are, where they've come from, the fact that Scotty's been in there for 18 months, and the fact that Essendon over the last, not just the last 18 months, but the last 5 years haven't really been in massive, intense situations where they need to make the right decision. And that's what I was trying to say to Kingy, that yes, they got Mackay over, and he made some terrible mistakes with his handballs, but what I was saying is that they're at a development phase where they're still learning from their mistakes. Under pressure, you know what to do and what not to do. And that's what I was just sort of saying, that with the ball, they made a lot of mistakes going forward, which they've done for the whole 18 months that Scotty's been there. Defensively, blokes haven't been in that situation. With a minute to go, you should know where to stand if you're an experienced, good team. And to win the close ones. You know, Collingwood would know exactly where to put someone because they've been in so many close games, in big games. Essendon haven't. So that's where I was more going along the phase of the more that they get themselves in these situations, the more that they're going to learn and the more they're going to develop. So that's all it was. It was just more of two people who don't like saying they're wrong were talking to each other.
Well, I don't know if anyone is right or wrong. That's probably the good debate that I can see the points that Kingy was making, and I could see the points that you were making.
No, I can confirm it was very heated. Very heated.
I saw you sitting there saying nothing.
Very awkward.
Sammy, you're sitting over there just
saying nothing.
You're trying to you're building up a little bit of courage to talk about the umpires, and all of a sudden you got sidetracked.
Was he defending the umpires again, Hodgie? Was he defending
mate.
them? Yeah,
for the whole 45 minutes, you're saying that every person should have been suspended from Friday
exactly
night.
Right.
But before we go any further,
Couldn't get a word in.
Can we just take a little bit of time? So any Collingwood supporter, we'll touch on this throughout the show, that was at the MCG for the Collingwood Hawthorn game and booed Ginnivan, can you call up? We want to have a bit of a chat because obviously he played it up. He played up to the crowd, and a lot of people loved it. A lot of people thought you smart, Alec. Jane Hall.
Yeah, Joe Hall.
Joe Hall, sorry. Joe Hall didn't like it. She tweeted something out, along with a lot of other Collingwood supporters. But if anyone was there who booed him, can you call up? I'd love to have a bit of a chat on the reasoning behind it, and that he went a little bit.
Hodgey,
he gave a little bit back.
Argumentative mood. He's been hanging
I'm
around.
not,
He's
Kane.
been hanging around me too
No,
much.
I'm not.
1300 736 736. If you were one of the 74,000 people at the G. And if any of you booed Ginnivan, ring us up on the Harcourts Open Line. Hodgie
like to hear
wants
from
to have
Joe.
a chat.
Joe, give us a call.
But what about our Hawks, Hodgie? How far can they go?
Mate, if you keep calling them our Hawks, I'm going to get called biased again. So they're your Hawks, Kane. You're full in support of but mate, they've been really good.
Are they the third best side out in it right now?
That's
Who's 1 and 2?
That's a big call.
Sydney's 1, Brisbane are 2,
right.
Hawthorn 3.
Okay.
Hawthorn are definitely up there. So you sort of look through, and do you know how everyone's talking about how they play the game? So it's taken the game on. Mitch has got on the weekend. Yes, the conditions weren't great for a tall, but he had Chol down in the forward line, and everyone else was about 5'6". You had Watson, you had Ginnivan, you had Luke Bruce, you had Moore. McDonald's a little bit taller than that, but they sized up really well, and they played to the lineup that they had. But what I have liked about them is their defence. And no one talks about their defence, but since round 8, they've had the fewest points scored against them out of anyone. So we're all talking about, they take the game on, they're risky, their midfield's really strong, but they've had the least scored against them. Also from turnover. So we're all talking about how risky their ball movement is, but they defend behind the ball. So if those short 45 or those long 45 risky kicks that they pull off to try and score, if that turns over, they're the number one team in defending scores from turnover. So you sort of look at how they're playing. No one's given them much credit for their defence, and I'm probably being a defender, probably looking at that more than what a lot of other people do. But there's one thing that has stood out, and this comes to a little bit from the scoring, but it also comes from the pressure. But there's only 3 teams, apart from Hawthorn, that have rated in the top 5 for points from turnover and points from stoppage. Mm-hmm. There's Sydney. They're rated 4th from scores from turnover and 1st from scores from stoppage. Brisbane, and you just said how good they've been going. They're 1st from turnover, 3rd from stoppage, and Fremantle. And we've just pumped up Fremantle, the football that they played on the weekend. And they're 3rd from turnover and 5th from stoppage. So you sort of look at this young team who, up until round 5, it looked like they were lost. Mitch tried to change a few things with the game style in the off-season, but he's very good at explaining a game style to a young group. And offensively, defensively, they've been really good since about round 8. So if they keep going the way they are, Kane, your team might be playing finals.
And that's exciting. A lot of text coming through for you, Hodgie. No calls yet. No one's been brave enough to ring up.
Were they friendly texts, Kane? Were they friendly texts?
I saw an old lady from the cheer squad
without teeth.
Ginnivan, an absolute mouthful, says Billy. Pies beat the Lions in a granny. Hodge, you flog. Get over it, says Snags.
Pies beat the Lions. So aren't we talking about Hawthorn and Pies?
I think they think you're biased
right.
towards the Lions. Hodgie, I'm a Pies supporter that wasn't there, but I would have booed just for the irony and for a laugh, says.
And this is where I'm going, Kane. They're a team that's been on the rebound. Yeah. Their first 5 or 6 games weren't great. And I still don't think they're going to make the finals because they're playing their best football at this stage of the year, and teams will figure out ways to beat them. But as I said, if you want to sit down and watch a game of football in those conditions, they played an exceptional brand. But and going back to what you're saying then, Kane, if I had coached Jack and doing the stuff, I would have said, stop that. I'm an old school. I don't like blokes doing that. I don't like blokes rubbing it in. But I've sort of softened a little bit the last couple of years that I understand that they do the goal celebrations and they do 4 or 5 different things. And that's the way the game's going. And I think that's what Sam Mitchell's really understood. He would have never played with these guys because he would have hated that and kicked them out of the football club. But the fact that he understands the times, he understands the players coming through do this, they have more fun doing it, and he's embraced it.
All right. I want to ask you, and it's not on your rundown, Hodgey, but Ken Hinkley has been linked to West Coast. Is that type of coach the right fit for West Coast? Dean Cox is out. Josh Carr is out. They've confirmed that. I'm not sure which way they will go, Hodgey, but is a more experienced coach who can demand high standards, perhaps do that role like a Paul Roos did at Melbourne, before the next younger coach is ready to take over a more complete and talented group?
Okay, you know me better than what I do, but looking from afar, I see what an older, more experienced, calmer person in Chris Fagan did for the Brisbane Lions Football Club. They weren't great for probably 5 or 6 years, didn't play finals. When he got there, they didn't have confidence. So he built up their confidence by relationships. He built them up by giving them trust, and now they'll do anything for him. I reckon that would be a great fit for someone who's come across to. You look at Kennett, how calm he is, but how well he knows his players. You see him on the bench, maybe having a bit of stern word to Butters or to Horn Francis when they haven't done something right, but he's got the relationship there with him. So if he's got him to go across there, build relationships with these young guys, but understand it may take some time, I think he would be a good fit.
It's an interesting dilemma because it seems to go in cycles. We go for the young coach, the old coach, the young coach, the old coach. And right now we've got Sam Mitchell, who's the flavour of the month. He's the young coach, Hodgey. And yet we've got Chris Fagan, as you've just enunciated, who's right back in favour after a shaky start and people starting to question him.
I think they're probably the next coach is not going to be the long-term coach. I just think they're starting from that far back with where the list is at. So I think the beauty of Ken, and I'm a big fan of Ken. The beauty of Ken would be to do that, to not be the nice guy, to come in, to demand really high standards and change the habits of that football club and set, what it takes to be a professional team that can compete every week. And then, I think it's very much like Paul Roos. So set your game plan up and then get the next coach in who's going to be the long-term one, who's going to have more of a chance of success than the next coach. I wouldn't think it's a great job for a young coach.
Do you think is that why Dean Cox said no to West Coast? Because how many coaches have actually came on in a rebuild and stayed there until success?
There were some personal reasons in and related to Dean Cox as well, with his kids and his wife and some. But they're fully entrenched in Sydney. I don't think it's going to be Ken though.
No,
I don't think it's going to be Ken at all.
But is that type of coach the better model for them until a younger one can come in and have more of a chance of success?
I think the bottom line is whoever goes in has got to be prepared for the long rebuild. It's not going to be an easy one.
No, indeed. Just some breaking
Will
news.
Barris stay?
Flip a coin on Tom Barris, I think. Yeah,
he's done that a couple of times, hasn't he?
And that's what I was just going to say. He'd be a brave person to predict what way this is going to go. All you can do, I think, is if you're a rival club, in which there are many over the time, is be at the front of the queue if he does decide to go. And at the moment, I think that's the Western Bulldogs. Just some breaking news out of the Brisbane Lions. So co-captain Harris Andrews is in the concussion protocols the club have just announced. Now, this isn't relating to the incident of which he passed a SCAT 6 test. That's the one they've got the please explain for. There was an incident with about 30 seconds left in the game that he has entered the concussion protocols from. So separate to the one that he passed, separate to the please explain.
Hodgey?
Yeah, you're right, Sammy. That was on the wing. There was a big contest with probably 3 or 4 minutes to go. He's come flying over third man in, lost his balance and fell back and hit his head. So the contest that happened where they got the please explain was when the big Marty hit when he got winded. Everyone thought he got winded and they told him that he had to go off for the HIA, but it was actually the ribs that was causing him the biggest issue. The one where he, with the head knock, was when, with about 4 minutes to go on the wing, where he fell back and hit his head. So you're spot on with that.
Good news for the Gold Coast, given that the Q Clash is on next week. Your thoughts on the Suns, Hodgey, and where you think they're travelling?
I'm still flabbergasted about the record of 9. Was it 9 at home, 8 away?
Yep.
What I did see on the weekend was a team that has been terrible away, but their effort early. So you look at half-time, they were plus 18 with contested possession. They were plus 10 with clearances. They were plus 12 with inside 50s. They had 18 forward-half turnovers to GWS's 5. But the part that's most important with that kind of stuff, they kicked 4 goals, 9 to 8-1. So I've been probably a bit hard, and I know Kane's definitely been hard at him. But at least what I saw in that first half was an intent to have a real crack over there, but they just couldn't. They didn't do it for 4 corners, which is the next step up.
Yeah, I thought they were set up for a big win, and their effort was clear. But it just begs a question now on their talent. Is that overrated? Given I think the effort's there, the system's there, no question about that. They go inside forward 50 as often as anybody, but they are not hitting targets inside forward 50 and not making good decisions when it's in there.
That doesn't help when Ben King, who he's been really good for him, I thought, over his journey so far. But he kicked 3 points from his 7 shots.
Yeah, it wasn't a good.
So I do understand it's windy conditions and it's not easy for goal kickers. But his first shot almost missed his boot. He had a shot. Yeah. He had a shot from the pocket where he had 2 blokes at the top of the goal square. It should have been so. He got a bit flustered and thought, I need to kick a goal because we had so many opportunities. But when you got your key forward having 3 points from 7 shots at goal, not going to help.
What do you think's holding Bailey Humphrey back? Because his first year was superb, and he signed up a long-term deal, Kane. I think it was in the 5 or 6 year.
I don't think he's fit enough, and that's just the observations of his body shape and perhaps the reluctance to give him any meaningful minutes through the midfield. So if he wants to be serious, he needs to get himself fitter in the off-season so he can spend more time in the midfield so he's not relying on being a deep forward or a high forward. I see him very similar to Cam Rayner, and we're seeing Cam Rayner start to explode. But he's 24, Jared. Like he's been around for a while.
Still means he's got 10 years of knocking blokes over.
So it takes some time. I'm not concerned about Humphrey, but takes some time for players to.
Pretty exciting though, Cam Rayner starting to put the Superman cape on.
It's amazing because he can do it all. Hodgey, and you may be able to give us some insight, but he's shaping up as a real finals wild card. And if this all comes together for him, look out.
Yeah, he's definitely that X factor for them. He was one of their better players in that first quarter and then in the last quarter. Being able to, the power to take on a tackle, have confidence where, I think it was 2 years ago before he did his knee, he had one of his best pre-seasons, then did his knee, set him back. And I think his development's probably been halted because they put him at half back for a pre-season to try and get him to understand the game because, Kane, he's one of those midfielders where it was just see ball, get ball, and he had no peripheral vision. It was if he was focused on the ball and he wouldn't understand the team, his opponents who would spread out wide. So they put him to half back to learn and understand the game, to understand patterns, to understand you got to swivel your head occasionally to have defensive impact off the ball. But if he can continue to do stuff like that, build his tank, you'll be wanting to go through the middle a little bit more as he gets a bit older.
He's excellent overhead. Nearly took another hanger yesterday, so he's got some
How
real
good
weapons.
was that leap?
Yep. Yeah. All right, the Giants, you liking what you're seeing?
Well, they're 3 wins their last 2 games, but the Giants that I saw at the start of the year, where it was the smooth ball movement, it was the contested possession, the clearances, that's dropped right away. So their last 5 weeks, and you look through their midfield, I know they've had some injuries, but Whitfield, Kelly, Canelio, Green, the guys that you expect to be consistent in there, they're rated 16th for contested possession differential, 18th for clearances. That group there, they're rated 18th for clearances. Their transition, which I watched them beat the Brisbane Lions on Anzac Day, they move the ball as good as any team from half back through. From D50 to forward 50, they're rated 14th. So that part of the Giants that you just think is hard to beat, can move the ball smooth, it's just not there. The only thing that is there is their pressure. They're the number 1 pressure team in that time, but that's given me a few concerns for them. They're still reasonably well placed on the ladder, but the football they're playing, especially in the contested possession area and the ball, the transition phase, which you need in finals, it's just letting them a bit short at the moment.
Hodgey, you've got Brisbane Lions and Sydney on your run sheet. This was always going to be a belter, and it did not disappoint. If the Lions aren't the hottest team in the competition at the moment, they are very, very close. How did you see it?
Well, I think that's been one of the better games of football that I've seen all year. I think it was the Lions jumped out of the blocks. Rayner was excellent. Joey Danaher started off on fire, kicking the first 2 goals. But then Sydney did what we expect Sydney to do. Sydney will never lay down. They'll always fight back. I think their 4 games that they've lost this year have all been under 10 points, I believe. You just knew it was going to be a battle. But then the ebbs and flows of that last quarter where the Lions looked like they had the swing of momentum, but then they couldn't convert. And then Hayward goes down after the Lions had about 5 shots in a row. Hayward goes down one and kicks a goal. It was just one of those battles that you knew that it was whoever walked out on top was going to be sore because it was that physical, but it was just a great spectacle to watch.
So 4 losses by a combined total of 10 points, it is, Jared, and they were down to 2 on the bench for a large period of the game in pretty walking. It was John Longmire was really keen to talk it up as a brave performance. It's sort of hard to argue with.
No, he couldn't. It was a really courageous performance. In fact, that's what made it an even better game. You just knew that there was one side that should have fallen over and didn't. But I thought they would look back at the tape, Hodgey, and say, we actually made a couple of fundamental errors at stoppage. when the first goal went through from McCluggage, I mean, you could just feel the atmosphere go up, and they just had to go super negative in the centre bounce, and they went attack. And then the other one was when Luke Parker came up onto Lachie Neale. I've seen that play happen about 3 times where he either flips it into space for Lachie Neale, who runs to goal, and this time he actually grabbed it out and handballed it to him. And, I mean, Lachie Neale just had to be kept in the vice, and they let him go free, and it just gave them a couple of, shots at goal that shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, and I think it was a game like that. There was so many times. I reckon both sides would probably look through and go, how many mistakes did we make? And if we tidy up 15, 20% of those, then the result might go our way, or even by lines even further. By Sydney might come back. But the battle throughout the midfield, Adams continually going to Lachie Neale. It was great to see. It stopped what Lachie Neale has been able to do. He's been probably the best midfielder going around for the last 8 to 10 weeks. And the other one was Dunkley. Dunkley just keeping an eye on Heaney throughout the midfield because we know how good a season Heaney's been. But what made me look at the losses that Sydney have had, there's been one consistent theme, and the theme of, I think the Bulldogs were the other team that probably should have beaten Sydney, but it was the kicking that let them down. Those 4 losses in the Bulldogs game, the opposition against Sydney have had over 100 marks. So what they've figured out is, and I wouldn't say that it's a trend that's going to beat them the whole time because they've lost in those 4 games by 10 points. So I wouldn't say it just shuts them down. But what it does do is you get the Warner, you get the Goulden, you get the Heeneys, these powerful blokes in a turnover game. They back himself, they run hard. It brings the game into Blakey as well because he gets to run off the half-back line, create stuff and opens up the field. But by building the game up by kick mark, a bit more composed, a bit slower, you can really defend behind it. And if you do turn the ball over through the midfield or in your forward half of the ground, you set up defensively behind the ball, which it stops their flow and doesn't give them that, I guess, the X factor midfield that they can just run and do whatever they want. So that's one consistent theme that they've had against Sydney is that just slow, composed ball the slow, composed ball build-up, which it's 100 marks, is seem to be that key where you need to get to against Sydney.
So nothing in the fact that they've lost 4 close games this year then? I mean, so 2 shots after the siren, Logan McDonald coulda, shoulda, woulda. There's injuries at the weekend. I mean, you can look at it both ways, can't you? That the games that they lose are by bees, or the fact that maybe there's something in the close games. Yeah, I mean, there's 2 ways to look at it, Hodgey.
Yeah, it is, and that's where if you look what Collingwood did, they had those close games, and you thought it was amazing effort, and they knew what they were doing the whole time because they kept winning those close ones. With Sydney are probably sitting here going, well, we've been a little bit unlucky. We've only lost the 4 games. It's under 10 points. But at some stage, you want to start to tighten those things up. So if I was a Sydney coach, over the next few weeks, I'll be making sure that there's 2 minutes left on the clock. We're down by 5 points. What do we do? We're up by 5 points. What do we do? Just put them in that situation. So the same result, because if this happens in finals, we've seen what's happened over the last couple of years or since footy started, that you don't get a second chance majority of the time.
Yeah.
I think the loss of Papley is at this stage estimated by Joe Public. His numbers have been incredible over the last 6 weeks. They haven't got superstar tools, as we know, but they can bring it to the ground. But if you take away your best ground ball player inside the forward 50, you're going to all of a sudden your forward line is not quite as functional.
But, I mean, they've had a charmed run with injuries, which is good management and good luck, Hodgey. Now, suddenly, right when you're getting on the final runway, you've got Rampy with a calf, Papley, as Gerard mentions, McInerney's out with that knee. Callum Mills should come back as well, but James Rowbottom's got the facial fractures. So these are tense times for the high-performance department when the whips are just starting to crack now.
Yeah, and it's the hardest thing for them is the big names. You can a lot of teams have got a few injuries, but they're the ones that are on the fringe players. You look through Mills, Papley, Rampy. They're guys that can win you games of football, and especially Papley, as you said before, Jared. That Papley in those pressure finals, he's someone who'll spark the crowd at Sydney. He'll kick a couple goals in quick succession. Almost does what Charlie Cameron does at the Gabba. The crowd get behind him and they lift behind him. So
you'll be tipping the Bulldogs next week at the SCG? Because they go up there with amazing form and the Swans are coming back off a hot game with travel and injuries.
No, I'll be still tipping Sydney. Just more the fact that we saw what Western Bulldogs did when they went across to Port Adelaide against a team who moves the ball really quickly. Port Adelaide embarrassed them a couple of weeks ago. Sydney still have the capabilities. If you look at the list that they have, how they want to move the ball, yes, we just mentioned a few guys that are out, but they've still got stars all over the field. And speaking of that, Goulden, I watched him closely yesterday. I don't think there's anyone in the AFL that works hard. I should have brought it up when Kane was in, considering he was an endurance beast. He is still himself. I don't think there's anyone who works as hard as Goulden in the AFL. And the position he runs to, if there's any young kid who wants to go and learn about running patterns or learn how to run hard and what angles to cut, go and watch Errol Goulden, because he's an absolute star and just a workhorse.
Can I put a rider on that, Hodgey? I'm a big fan of Errol's, as you would you expect, like everybody. And yesterday isn't a great example because they were essentially down on rotations on the bench. But they need him running hard in tight games at the finish, and he, I think, needs to rotate off the ground and just freshen up.
Yeah, he came off a couple times. We were sitting pretty much right behind the bench, and he came off a couple of times, and he looked exhausted. Yeah. It was a hot day up there. It was extremely warm.
Wasn't a great example yesterday, but I saw him not being able to run in the last 3 minutes, and that's the first time I've seen him not be able to run.
Yeah, and I think with that, a lot of players, especially finals intensity, you're going to tire towards the end of the game. If you get a bloke, that's why Hugh McCluggage is really good for the Lions, because at the end of the game, he's still running, he's still breaking lines. And Errol's that same bloke. So it's whether you save some petrol tickets during that second quarter for the last quarter, but they're the ones that can break the game open. They're the guys that can kick a goal late, which will get you over the line.
That Hugh McCluggage first goal was one of the more extraordinary goals that it snuck through between Lewis Melican and the goal, and yet. Like, there was about 1.5 meters to get it through. Melican had 40 metres to eye it off, and yet it went with such speed that it got through anyway.
Yeah, I found that those kind of midfielders, they do the freaky things at the right times. And that's, Errol, he had 27 yesterday, probably got burnt on 10 different touches that he could have. But you're not surprised when you see some of the mids, like, you see some of the stuff that Nick Dacos does and a few of the others. I know we're in the Collingwood theme, but Hugh McCluggage, Errol Goulden, these kind of guys, you're not surprised if they do anything on a field because of how consistent and how good they are.
92% of game time for Errol Goulden as well. He's been pretty open about wanting to play every minute of every game as a winger, which would be no mean feat. Hey, the Sydney Swans, just before we leave them, have announced that Tom Papley has sustained a medial ankle ligament injury, and they put the timeline at 4 to 6 weeks. So that optimism, I think you'd probably take that at the moment. You mentioned how it didn't look good to the eye, Gerard, in the moment. So 4 to 6 weeks, that puts him hard up with finals, of course, for Tom Papley. Dane Rampy, they're describing as calf tightness and to be further assessed by Sydney's medical staff
2 to 3.
Tomorrow, probably. Will Hayward suffered a lateral ankle sprain in the second quarter, the Swans are saying. Obviously played out the match, and he will be a test for the Western Bulldogs.
Most unusual injury, the medial ligament of the ankle. And you do see, that's the only little mechanism you could see, but it's not like a big roll, and it doesn't have to be for the medial ligament. But they're not an easy fix. They don't fix up as easy as the laterals.
Hodgey, the last game of the round took place at twilight at Marvel Stadium yesterday. Carlton 16-11-107, North Melbourne 14-4-88. I tell you what, North had their moments in this game, and it could have easily gone the other way. The scoreboard, you wouldn't say is a lie, but doesn't tell the full story of it. Were you satisfied that Carlton's recent struggles are in the rear vision mirror?
Look, I was pretty excited by North Melbourne, to be honest.
Yep.
And yes, Carlton, I've always said a good team finds a way to win. And that's what Carlton did. Carlton are a good team. They found a way to be more composed late in the game. Curnow stepped it up when he needed to. Their top-end talent is a lot better than North Melbourne. So I felt Carlton were always going to win that game because of who they had on the park and what happens in the pressure situation. But I liked how North went about it. I liked the changes they made. To be going up at half-time in front against the team who we've all rated as the second or third best team throughout the year, or even up to a month ago, we said that they're probably going to be flag favourites over Sydney. So I was impressed with that. But I'm looking forward to this Friday night. Carlton are going to get a real test against Port Adelaide, and I want to see what they've learnt. What have they lost? 2 of the last 3 games. They've sort of had their backs against the wall. They've got a few injuries now. We're sort of sitting back to see what can Carlton do over the next 4 or 5 weeks while they try and sort their side out going into a final series?
Yeah, watch on Sam Walsh going forward and Blake Acres as well, and obviously Tom De Koning will not be there, so Mark Pitnet will come in, Gerard.
If Walsh is getting tagged, do you think he should have gone on to someone like a Cheezel?
I guess Vossi's at that stage where do you back Sam Walsh to run the opponent off his feet? There's some blokes who just cannot run people off their feet because fitness base isn't there, or the person who's tagging him is a lot better. I'd be having the conversation with Walsh to sort of say, how are you feeling? Do you think you need to make a 2v1? Can we put you as a high half forward, bring you up to the ground, bring you up into a contest to lose your tagger and be able to run forward? So there's no doubt there's some conversations to be had with Walsh. But Walsh still had 25, so he still had a decent impact on the game. But there's probably different tricks that you can, and it's probably a good time for him to be getting tagged this time of year. So if that does happen in the last month of the season in September, that they've got a few tricks that they can sort of manoeuvre to get away from it or get around it.
A month ago, Rory Lobb was a great surprise to see him stationed in a key defensive post against North Melbourne. That was round 17. Not Aaron Norton, Rory Lobb was the man that was to go back under Luke Beveridge's team. And I would contend that since then, every week he's got better and better and better, and it reached its high watermark at the weekend when he completely annihilated Jeremy Cameron and helped himself to a swag of intercept marks and a stack of disposals as well.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I think everyone got a bit of a surprise when he ran out and went down to the defensive end. I think we all thought they were kicking the wrong way. But Bevo obviously had a plan with him. There was so much talk about the Western Bulldogs and what are they going to do. They said he was off the trade table. This is early. He was trying to play forward. He was trying to play ruck. He just couldn't pin down those positions. Obviously, Norton and Ugle-Hagan are in front of him in those areas, and now Darcy has come charging in and is playing some really competitive football, solid football for a young guy. But well done to Bevo for throwing him back there. And since he has gone back in the last month of football, he's number 2 in the comp for intercept marks. He's number 3 in the comp for intercept possessions. And the fact that he was able to keep Jeremy Cameron to 1 goal. Jeremy Cameron didn't have a mark inside forward 50. Jeremy Cameron had 1 mark for
He looked
the
flat
game.
too, Jeremy.
He did, and obviously that's only happened to Jezza twice. The Brisbane game when the conditions were horrendous for all forwards, and then on the weekend. So Bevo must be starting to change his tune a little bit about Rory Lobb, I think.
Well, he's going nowhere if you had a say in it. Surely he's not going to be allowed out of the place, is he?
No, I don't think so. I mean, Tom Barrass, they're in the queue for Tom Barrass, absolutely. But I think now he stays, absolutely. I mean, he went
Would you still be in the queue for Tom Barrass?
Oh, I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I think he would
Hasn't done enough for you to...
Oh, no, I'm a big Rory Lobb fan.
Okay.
Don't get me wrong. In fact, I want an apology from Kane Cornes because he said when he first went back, would you trust him in a final? I said, forget final. Let's just worry about the next week. And we are seeing what he's offering week upon week down there. This was, you mentioned Luke Beveridge. Hodgey, this was the Western Bulldogs coach when he was asked about Rory Lobb at the weekend.
In times in the future, if we lose key forwards through injury and we know we've got Lobby there.
So he went into the coach's office when the reports emerged and he said, I'm going to fight for my spot. I'm a bit embarrassed about this. I'm humiliated by it. I want to sit here. I want to fight. And look, the proof's been in the pudding.
Yeah, he looks fantastic. He looks at home. He's always been able to read the play well, and it's surprising that someone even in Fremantle didn't try that at some stage because intercept tall defenders, they're hard to find, Hodgey.
Yeah, they are. And he made a fair point saying that the good defenders are normally the reject forwards, and he was sort of taking the mickey out of himself. But is that hard for Bevo now to sort of go back on, saying that he should never be out of our side? He can play ruck, he can play forward, he can play back. He's got a spot in the Western Bulldogs team for as long as he wants it, and clearly from those comments from Bevo that he's not going anywhere in the near future.
Yep.
No, I think he's nailed one of the key defensive positions. The question is if Liam Jones comes back, well, maybe they go 3. So they've got 2 interceptors. Buka Karmas is the hybrid.
They're dangerous, Darren, aren't
Bailey
they?
Dale across the half back is all Australian after being basically dropped to the sub bench very early in the season. Yeah, they're dangerous.
Won 7 of last 10. And again, like we've seen so many times this season, Hodgie, the perfect matchup at the perfect time. They've got the Sydney Swans next. So what a great test for the Dogs to see where they're at. But 4 of the last 5, the midfield's absolutely humming at the moment. And they stuck fat. Like while Geelong maybe second-guessed the conditions and took Shannon Neal out at the last minute, they went in with the land of the Giants. The Dino Dogs, and they got it done.
The one thing I haven't heard the last few weeks, Hodgie, is Norton to centre half back.
No, that's been squashed.
That's been killed.
I think that's what Bevo's more happy about. Lobb's playing fantastic down there, but he won't hear the fact that Norton is the man to go back anymore. He stayed very firm, and look, to be honest, they're sitting ninth. They're half a game out of the 8th, and you're sort of looking at how Essendon are travelling at the moment. Port Adelaide got a big game this weekend against Carlton.
They've probably got to beat the Swans this week. The Dogs, I reckon.
Yeah,
and they're a genuine chance to be able to do it.
Oh, they're definitely a chance. I'd still have Sydney going in as favourite at home and with the list they have. But if you look at the matchups this year, you're not surprised if anyone beats who. If you look at what North Melbourne did against Carlton on the weekend. So you go through, and if Bulldogs at their best could beat anyone. It's just having that consistency and being able to do it week in, week out. They've been playing, as Sammy said before, their form of late has been really good. They've just got another big challenge this weekend. Try and get another win to get inside that top 8.
Yep. The other thing is with those, players who have been in the trade space or rumoured to be, is that the Dogs don't have to get rid of them. They're under no cap pressure at all. So the Caleb Daniels of the world, the Rory Lobbs. I mean, unless Caleb Daniel bangs down the door to leave, you're probably keeping him. Certainly Rory Lobb, as someone says off the text, how many 207 centimetre footballs can play key back, ruck, key forward in the comp?